gap as evidence.
You must have it.
I didn't know.
The actor the BBC didn't want, the show built to plug a gap, and the single production decision its own leading man called fatal, Bergerac was never the breezy Sunday night detective drama its audience thought it was. Behind 10 years of Jersey sunshine, a temperamental old Triumph Roadster, and a reggae theme that somehow won a BAFTA, the real story is stranger, more troubled and more accidental than anyone watching ever realised. Secret 1, built to plug a gap.
That's what we don't understand yet.
And the bloke he chased?
Still in the dark there.
Nothing in Tom's notebook.
It was in his pocket. He got charred.
Here's where the real story starts. Bergerac was not the product of careful long-term planning. It was an emergency replacement. The BBC had a prize Sunday night detective slot held by Shoestring, a smart, well-reviewed series starring Trevor Eve as a private investigator working out of a Bristol radio station, and Shoestring, against the network's wishes, came to an abrupt end after only 2 series. Trevor Eve wanted out. The BBC needed something to fill the gap, and they turned to the producer who had created Shoestring in the first place, Robert Banks Stewart. Stewart was given a brief that amounted to invent us another detective and do it now. What he came back with was Bergerac, a recovering alcoholic policeman with a broken leg, working a fictional department of the Jersey police, set on an island most British viewers had only vaguely heard of. None of those choices were obvious. None of them were guaranteed to work. The show that ran for 9 series across a decade existed at all only because another show had collapsed without warning, and someone had to come up with something fast.
Was all that information I smuggled to you any use?
Well, I got so far with it. It's time to make a report and hand it over.
Secret 2. Nettles was the gamble.
Where is it? The package.
What package? You know damn well which package. The one you got in Paris from the Algerian. I watched you all the way back here.
The casting of the title role was, by current standards, almost reckless. John Nettles in 1981 was not a star. He had done theatre work and supporting parts, but had never carried a television series, and the BBC was uneasy about handing a major Sunday night slot to an actor most viewers would not recognise. Banks Stewart had seen Nettles in a stage production, decided immediately that he was the only person who could play the part, and had to fight the network's reluctance to make the casting happen. Years later, Banks Stewart was blunt about how unusual that was. He said openly that a programme like Bergerac would never get made today without a household name attached, and that it was only because he insisted on Nettles that the casting went through at all. Within a year of the first episode airing, Nettles was one of the most recognisable faces on British television. The BBC had been wrong about the risk. The producer who saw something the network didn't had been right. Without Banks Stewart's stubbornness, Bergerac would have starred somebody else, and almost certainly would not have lasted 10 years.
He was a complete failure as an officer. That soured him.
That and his treatment in the prison camp.
So his story about Sir John was...
Pack of lies from beginning to end.
Secret 3. The leg he forgot. One of the half-remembered details of the early series is that Jim Bergerac was written as a man recovering not just from alcoholism, but from a serious physical injury. His leg had been crushed during a drunken pursuit of a suspect before the first episode begins, and the character spends the early series visibly limping, sometimes leaning on a stick. It was meant to add depth, to suggest a man held together by willpower more than fitness. What makes the detail darker, in a comic way, is that Nettles himself has admitted he could never quite keep track of which leg was supposed to be injured. He has spoken openly about watching back scenes and realising he had switched legs between takes, limping on the right in one shot and the left in the next, and back again. The injury was supposed to be a defining piece of the character's interior life. In practice, it became a quiet continuity problem that the production let slide, until the character's recovery had progressed enough that the limp could vanish entirely without anyone needing to explain when.
Almost finished now.
Haven't felt a thing.
Good.
Secret 4. A BAFTA for reggae. The opening title music to Bergerac is one of the strangest things ever to have soundtracked a BBC detective series, and it won a BAFTA for being exactly that. The composer George Fenton built the theme around a reggae rhythm with an accordion refrain laid on top, a combination that had no obvious connection to either Jersey, the 1940s aesthetic of the show's car, or the detective genre as British audiences had come to expect it. There was no template for the choice, there was no precedent. There was simply Fenton making the decision that the show needed something that did not sound like anything else on television and trusting that an audience would follow. The gamble paid off completely. In 1982, Fenton won the BAFTA for Best Original Television Music for the Bergerac theme, and the music became inseparable from the show's identity in the way only the best title sequences ever manage. Decades later, the 2025 reboot deliberately abandoned the original arrangement, partly out of respect for what it had been, and partly because no contemporary recreation could match the strange specificity of the original choice. A reggae detective theme should not have worked. It did. It is one of the small miracles of British television music. Secret 5. 2 cars, both broken. The 1947 Triumph Roadster that Jim Bergerac drove around Jersey is, by some distance, one of the most recognisable vehicles in British television history, and what audiences never knew was that there were 2 of them. The first car broke down so frequently that the production acquired a second as a backup, simply because a schedule built around one of the most temperamental classic British cars of the post-war era could not survive on a single working vehicle. Crew members have described days when neither car would start and filming had to be rearranged around the failures. The Roadster itself had been a commercial disappointment on first release. Triumph built only around 2,500 of them before discontinuing the model, partly because the post-war sports car market preferred the sleeker, faster designs that Jaguar and others were producing. Without Bergerac, the 1947 Triumph Roadster would have ended up as a footnote known mostly to enthusiasts. Because of Bergerac, it became one of the most photographed, most identifiable classic cars ever to appear on British screens.
You mean Simon Gibbons. Don't talk to me about him.
A car saved from obscurity not by its engineering but by 10 years on television in the hands of a fictional detective. If you're enjoying this, it would mean a lot if you subscribed. It helps us keep making videos like this one. Just hit that button and you'll never miss a new one. And stay with us, because secret number 8 is about the single decision that quietly killed one of Britain's biggest detective dramas.
Well, about 5 years ago, his mum used to swan about in an American 4-wheel drive. A big flashy job.
Secret 6, partly made in Australia.
I don't believe they're involved.
Yeah, well, look, don't spend days on it. We've got enough on our hands. What the hell's this stuff doing here?
That's evidence.
Of what?
Here is a detail almost no British viewer ever registered. Bergerac was not a pure BBC production. It was a co-production between the BBC and Australia's 7 network. An arrangement that was unusual for a Sunday night British detective drama, and stranger still given that the show is, in tone and setting, one of the most quintessentially British things the BBC made in the 1980s. The Australian involvement provided part of the financing in exchange for broadcast rights in that market, and the show became enormously popular in Australia as a direct result. The international dimension explains something that often surprises people now. Bergerac's fan base, even at its peak, was never just British. The show ran in Norway, Australia, New Zealand, and across continental Europe, often dubbed into local languages and shown at prime time. John Nettles has spoken about the disorientating experience of being recognised by Norwegian and Australian fans decades after the show ended, sometimes more frequently than by British viewers. The image of a Jersey detective driving a vintage British sports car, shaped by the BBC, partly paid for in Sydney, ended up belonging to half the world.
Little do-it-yourself.
A bit too much do-it-yourself about the way you work. And stretching a point over that car doesn't mean carting building materials around.
Secret 7. Jersey was the other lead.
I see you finally made it, Sergeant Hungerford. Quartermaster Sergeant? What the devil are you doing here, Colonel?
The relationship between Bergerac and the island of Jersey was not incidental. It became in time one of the most economically and culturally consequential relationships between a television show and a real place in British media history. Jersey's tourism authorities have credited the show with a transformation in the island's profile that has lasted across decades. Filming locations became destinations. Fans travelled specifically to see the harbour Bergerac walked along, the road his Triumph drove down, the hotel where Charlie Hungerford ran his schemes. When the show ended in 1991, Jersey did not let the relationship lapse. Tour companies built itineraries around filming locations. Local museums kept the connection alive. And when the 2025 reboot was being commissioned, the island government quietly co-funded the new production, recognising that a returning Bergerac was worth more than almost any direct tourism campaign could buy. John Nettles himself called Jersey the show's other star. And he was not exaggerating. The island and the series have been holding each other up for 40 years.
Good morning. Where is he?
Looks like he was knifed straight through the heart. Not a chance.
Okay.
Secret 8, the decision that killed it.
That's it. Wasn't that Donald Early?
That's right, Ted. He used to work here.
Before my time. He made it big, didn't he? The Nationals, then Reuters.
Bergerac did not end because audiences stopped watching. It ended because of a single production decision that, in retrospect, almost everyone agreed had been a mistake. For the final 2 series, the production was relocated from Jersey to Provence in southern France, partly to follow the character into new territory, partly because the show was hugely popular in France, and partly because the production economics had begun to favour a change. The decision was made with reasonable intentions, and it very nearly destroyed the show overnight. John Nettles has spoken about it with unusual directness. He has described the Provence move as fatal, the word is his, and explained that without Jersey, the show simply collapsed in on itself. The relationships between the characters did not translate. The sense of place that had carried 9 series of stories evaporated almost immediately. Provence was beautiful, but Provence was not what audiences had been watching for a decade. By the time the production realised what it had lost, the damage was done. Bergerac ended in 1991 not because it had run out of stories, but because it had walked away from the one thing that had made those stories work.
Oh, professionally, eh? Well, now, I thought I'd paid that parking ticket. So what have I done?
It's not what you've done, Mr. Thomas. It's what you're about to do.
Secret 9, the reluctant heartthrob.
I reckon he'll probably get off.
Yes, which means that he and his old man and their company will get off the hook too, doesn't it?
Right.
What happened to John Nettles personally during the run of Bergerac is one of the more uncomfortable footnotes in British television history. By the middle of the show's run, Nettles had become, against his own evident wishes, a national sex symbol. The News of the World ran the headline, "All the girls want to grasp Nettles." Fan letters arrived in volumes the production was not prepared for. Tabloid attention followed him in a way that would now be called intrusive, and was at the time simply accepted as the cost of being famous. Nettles wrote a book about it. In 1991, the year Bergerac ended, he published a semi-autobiographical work titled Nudity in a Public Place, Confessions of a Mini-Celebrity. A wry, ironic, sometimes genuinely bruised account of what it had been like to become a face that millions of people felt they owned. The book is not bitter, but it is honest. The fame that Bergerac produced was, for the man who had to carry it, considerably more complicated than the warm public image ever let on. He spent 10 years playing a man falling apart, while quietly enduring the strangeness of being adored by strangers. Secret 10. Why it still matters.
Just what is your game?
I'm sorry, Mr. Fair, there's been some mistake.
A very unfortunate mistake. For which you better have a bloody good explanation.
I saw it right here, Barney, in this room.
Let's leave it, Jim.
No, hang on.
When Bergerac returned in February 2025 with Damian Moloney in the title role and Zoe Wanamaker playing a gender-flipped Charlie Hungerford, the original cast was approached for cameos. John Nettles turned his down. He was 81, he thought he was too old, and he wanted the new version to be its own thing. He has since publicly praised the reboot and described it as something quite different from what he made. Cliff Richard to Moloney's Clint Eastwood, in his own self-deprecating phrase. What the reboot's existence proves is not that the original was repeatable, but that it has remained across 4 decades genuinely loved. Bergerac caught something. A tone, a place, a character, a particular kind of British detective who was allowed to be flawed and warm and unimpressive in ways the genre had not quite permitted before. The recovering alcoholic on the difficult island, with the difficult car and the difficult ex-wife and the slowly healing leg, became a portrait of a kind of resilience that British audiences recognised because they were quietly living it themselves. That is the real secret of Bergerac. It was never about the murders. It was about a man trying to keep going, and 40 years later the audience still wants to know how he gets on.